So, I am an optimist. And believe me, working in the field of sustainability, climate change, and leadership, that's sometimes a bit challenging. Because honestly, most of our leaders today have no clue how to address the complexities of the issues that we're facing. Most of them are educated with a logic that may have served us well in the previous century, but it's not geared to address the challenges that we're facing today. So why am I an optimist? I'm an optimist because I see the dawn of a new leadership logic, a new paradigm, a new generation of leaders is definitely in town. And their secret is that they apply the logic of life itself to how they run organizations. And what does that mean? To explain that, I would like to take you on a journey back in time to how life on Earth began. So this is our amazing home. She is 4.6 billion years old, so quite an experienced lady. And life on Earth began 3.8 billion years ago. But I mean, who can get his head around numbers like that? So to reduce complexity, let's use numbers that we can actually relate to. So let's say life began 38 years ago. It started when the first cells formed deep in the oceans of the planet. And then constantly new life forms emerged. Crabs and corals and jellyfish. And many years later, 4 years ago, life went on land. And 2 years ago, fish-like creatures emerged into dinosaurs and birds and other land-living animals. And then 2 days ago, we, the Homo sapiens, came around. So literally the day before yesterday, we came around. And for 99% of the time that we have been here on this planet, and in real time it's 200,000 years, but for 99% of that time, we have lived completely in tune with our natural habitat. We knew that our survival were dependent on our ability to build relationships with our community and understand and read the patterns and signs of nature. We saw ourselves as one with nature. Today we have moved into big cities. We live in high rises in concrete buildings very far away from our natural habitat. But we have done some amazing things. For the past 2 seconds that we have been around, we have been to the moon, we have invented airplanes and cars and mobile phones and the internet and artificial intelligence and chocolate chip cookie dough ice cream. We have done some really amazing things. But unfortunately, our ways have also caused quite a destruction of the natural ecosystems on which all life depends. Scientists are warning that we are in the midst of the sixth mass extinction, that our climate is breaking down, and we only have a few years to solve this. But are we at least having fun while we are causing havoc on this planet? Are we happy? Not really. In fact, for as long as researchers have tracked our stress and anxiety levels, it has never been as bad as it is today. We have never been more stressed and more worried and anxious than we are today. And to be honest, I think we fail to believe that the stress that we experience in our inner ecosystems are directly related to the stress that we have put on our outer ecosystems. They go together and they're constantly feeding each other. And I believe it all boils down to the fact that the principles on which we have designed our civilization has deviated from the logic on which life has evolved and emerged for billions of years. So, for example, when I was in business school, I was taught this logic of short-term profit maximization, efficiency, control. I was taught how to win an argument using tactics. I was told how to sell as much as possible to as many as possible, how to make my operations lean and efficient. And everything was just based on this underlying assumption that natural resources was this free-for-all, and that human resources, they were best optimized using command and control tactics. But I believe this logic is making us very ill. So I believe our big challenge right now is to ask ourselves the question, how can we reclaim our role as respectful partners with this interconnected web of life that we are all dependent on and part of? And how can leaders integrate this logic of life into how they lead and run organizations? And thankfully, there are many pioneering leaders out there that are experimenting with this. And my colleague and co-author Giles Hutchins and I, we have spent the past years mapping these leaders and their best practice to weave the DNA of a new regenerative leadership paradigm. And what we have found is that there are 5 basic principles in how they work with the logic of life that they integrate into their leadership. And I would like to share those with you. So the first one is that everything they do is based on life-affirming principles. This is not waste. This is precious nourishment for other life forms. And inside this rotten apple is the seed for new life. Regenerative leaders, they apply life-affirming circular principles into how they produce their products. They make sure everything is reused, recycled, upcycled in this closed loop. They use the circular economy. And their material culture is based on the innovation and R&D of nature's 3.8 billion years of R&D. So they use regenerative materials. They use the concept of biomimicry. And one example is a company that has gone all the way. Interface is currently using the aspiration of a forest to build their new factories. So they want their factories to purify water, turn sunlight into energy, use regenerative materials, and make sure that everything is in this closed loop. But it's not just in the terms of how they produce and consume that regenerative leaders are life-affirming. It's also how they treat their employees. Instead of a fear-infused culture where you backstab each other, they make sure to provide a safe space for their employees to grow and evolve, to feel safe enough to fail because you learn immensely from your fails. And we see that again and again, that leaders that have applied a developmental culture are those that can create those organizations where people actually come alive. And the second principle that these leaders work with is that they know that in life, change is a constant. Everything is constantly changing. And that these very rigid hierarchical structures that we are used to in many corporations is not fit for change. But we live in a world where change is happening every second. And these rigid hierarchies, they are stalling new decisions. They are often very fear-infused. And in many of these hierarchies, research has shown that over 50% of the workforce feels disengaged. They don't feel trusted, they don't feel empowered, and many people spend a lot of time hiding precious knowledge in pockets, because power or knowledge is power. And to walk the corporate ladder, you need to protect your wisdom. And that means that the organization becomes very, very slow at gearing up. Whereas a responsive system is much faster and much quicker. And I would like to give you an example of how that actually works. So a Dutch organization is based on self-organizing principles. And it means that they work in teams of 10 to 12. And they are 1,000 teams today. They started over 10 years ago and have grown from 4 people to 14,000 using these self-organizing principles. And the CEO is not a dictator, he is a facilitator and a listener. So they don't have the management level, they have 50 people who are more like a support team. And then via an app-based system, they constantly listen in to the 14,000 members and get feedback and ideas. And in that process, they have grown to be the most productive, the most profitable, the most cost efficient, and are constantly being rated as the best employer of the year. You don't have to go all the way, but you can integrate pockets of self-organization where you empower your employees to make decisions on the ground based on the values of the company. The third thing is that everything in life is relational and interconnected. We have been falsely trained to believe that the survival of the fittest was the strongest, the loudest, the most dominant. But life did not take over the world by combat and control. Life took over the world thanks to relationships. And we know that the species that have been here the longest has been those that have been best at connecting and creating really strong relationships. And regenerative leaders, they know that. They know that in order to be successful, they need to build win-win-win partnerships where they win, their partners win, and the greater ecosystem on which we depend, they win as well. So, and part of this interconnectedness is also leaning on to the fourth principle, which means that relationships and the components of these ecosystems has to be diverse. Life bangs and thrives on diversity. Research shows again and again, and McKinsey did a large study in 2015 where they interviewed 366 publicly listed companies and found out that those with the greatest levels of diversity constantly outperformed those with low levels of diversity. But we have created these monocultural corporate cultures where managers keep hiring people that reminds them of themselves, that feel safe, they have the same cultural background, the same educational background, and that feels nice and safe. Regenerative leaders, they go out of their way and hire people from other educational backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, and they know that it's the unconventional minds that will infuse the entity and the organization with the life and the ideas. They also know that diversity can bring in tension, but that tension often unveils golden nuggets of wisdom, and new ideas emerge in that friction and in that tension. It's a matter of how we deal with that tension when cultures collide. And if we do that respectfully, we are set up for success. So the last principle is the respect of the fact that we are all cyclical beings living on a cyclical planet. We have the seasons, the night and the day, the ebb and the flow of the tides. Yet we have created cultures that want to be in a constant loop of spring and summer. Constantly we want to sow the new seeds, we want to get the great ideas, we want to put them to market, we want to reap the fruits of our work on repeat. But we fail to respect the fact that life has to go through certain phases in order to be whole and to thrive. We need the darkness of the winter. We need the restorative nights. And regenerative leaders understand this. They have incorporated silence into their meetings to anchor and ground the energy. They encourage breaks and meditation. But they also make sure that every time they have been through a growth spurt and launched a new product or put a new idea to market, that they then create a different pace in the work environment. that they create the space for reflection, integration, and learning from what we've just been through instead of just pushing and going forward with new ideas. Our brainwaves need that time to recalibrate, to be truly wise beings. Homo sapiens, as supposed to be the wise beings. So I believe it all boils down to us reclaiming this knowledge which is inherent in every system around us. And I believe it's time that we dare infuse our civilization design with life and vitality. And back to why I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist because I see these regenerative leaders growing in number by the day. And while they are creating vibrant and thriving cultures, they are also showing that this is good business. And coming from the business world, I know that matters to many more than anything. But they are showing again and again that this is a good business case to take care of our inner resources and our outer resources. And I think it's actually quite simple. I mean, either we change our ways to be in tune with the laws of this planet that we inhabit, the logic of life, or we continue the downward, degenerative, destructive spiral. And I have great faith in us having the courage to go through this necessary collective metamorphosis where we leave what doesn't serve life behind. And then we start choosing life and infuse everything we do with life. So as I personally gear down when I leave the stage now to bring in new life in a few weeks' time, I would like to leave you with some very wise words from Winnie the Pooh and his friend Piglet. So Winnie asked Piglet, "How does one become a butterfly?" "You must want to fly so much that you're willing to give up being a caterpillar." "Do you mean to die?" "Well, yes and no. What looks like you will die, but really, you will live on." Thank you.